It's on red, is that all right? Put it on red, okay, yeah. Better than green, yeah. Right, good evening everyone. It's it's way past your bedtimes. And what are you annoying? Everything I say, I don't want everyone to take offence of everything I say. I know you probably will, yeah, of course. Yeah, welcome to the Hounslow South, Isleworth, Osterley and Spring Grove Board's Area Forum. Thank you for coming. Again, I'll just read this statement out first. Or it's not really a statement, it's a warning. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and private and personal information should not be shared in the meeting. The recording will be made available for public viewing on Hounslow Council's YouTube page in the coming days. All right? If you don't like that, please leave. Yeah, charming. Yeah, I know. Right, so should we kick off then? Got any apologies for absence? I've got Councillor Unser Chowdhury, and I think that's it, is it? That is it. Okay, good. Right. Got any declarations of interest from councillors? Good. Officers, any declarations of interest? Okay. Good. Let's start off then. We're currently as a local authority, like other local authorities do, working on developing our new health and wellbeing strategy with partners, but particularly the main partners are our residents. We've got Dr. Kelly O'Neill, our Director of Public Health, and we've got Mr. Stephen Forbes, who's the Executive Director for Adult and Children's Services. He might be running other things at the moment during reorganisations, but I'm asking them to make a presentation. Some of you have seen them already downstairs and writing on tables. It's like being back at school. Can I ask you to kick off, and we'll have some questions later on as well from residents.
Thank you, Chair. Just again to introduce myself, I'm Stephen Forbes, I'm Executive Director for Children's and Adult Services at the Council, and my colleague here is Kelly O'Neill, who's the Director of Public Health. And as the Chair said, we're here to talk to you tonight about the Health and Wellbeing Strategy. And to put that into context, we are, as a council, with our NHS partners and the community, obliged to have a health and wellbeing strategy. The current one lasts till next year, 2026, so this is us beginning a process of reviewing the health and wellbeing strategy, but most importantly, having a bit of a conversation with the community, and this is one of many area forums that Kelly and I have visited over the last 3 months and coming months. And we'll continue that conversation, because what we're really interested to hear is what's important for you as members of the community, your family and people you know in the local community about improving your health. We're quite interested to hear about services. Some of those services are ones that we operate and run in the council. Some will be services that NHS colleagues run and operate. But we're also much more interested in about what's important to you and your family in terms of your own health and well-being. So really want to hear that tonight. What Kelly's going to do now is just take you through some data and information related to the health and well-being of the local population in your ward. So it's in comparison to Hounslow as well. So she'll take you through that, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat at the end, as the Chair said, about some questions that I would pose to you and some issues that we might want to address, and then we'll take it away from there. So over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. Just to pick up, we do this every 3 years, and I think it's fair to say that in the past we've really focused on a little bit of a medicalised model and sort of thinking about health in quite a narrow way. And this next slide just sets out that health is so much more than access to GP services and access to primary care and hospitals. Essentially, those things are important, but fundamentally the most important things that sort of drive health is behaviour, the environment in which we're born, we grow and live, and things such as that the homes we live in, the open spaces around us, the work that we do, the education that we have, and more importantly, the relationships we have with key people in our lives. And that is fundamentally one of the really big drivers. What's missing from this picture is wealth and income. And there's no, you can't get away from the fact that wealthier people and more affluent people tend to be healthier. And so the more deprived an area is, the less likely that people will be healthy in general. And we're talking about a population level, we're not talking about individuals here. So what I'll go on to do now is focus on just some comparisons, and this is just to stimulate some conversation. And we can go into details about sort of health and health risks, but again, I'd rather the conversation really think about what's important to you in terms of health, and what's important to you about the environment in which you live, which fundamentally has a much more significant impact on that kind of prevention and healthy agenda than health services. So moving on. What we've done is looked at the wards, so of Hounslow South, Isleworth, Osterley and Spring Grove, and we've compared the data with the rest of the borough, so the rest of the borough in general. So we've looked at sort of percentage of households that are overcrowded. This is based on the number of bedrooms that people have in their home in relation to the number of people that are living in the house. The average is 14.6% for the rest of Hounslow, so fewer households, 10.2% of households are overcrowded in this particular area. And what we also look at is things like sort of proxy measures of lack of central heating. Now, very few houses have a lack of central heating, but there is just over still 2% in the rest of the borough, and it's low, it's 1.8% in this particular area. So when we look at income and universal claimants is based on low income, and it's based on on people who are unemployed. When we look at the comparisons between this area and the rest of the borough, fewer people are claiming universal benefits. And then if we look at crime rate, which is a really key measure for public health, crime again is quite significantly lower than the rest of the borough in general. In terms of access to green spaces, what we do have is sort of an average of about 300 metres for people to access any green space. The average in this area is about 1 metre less, but green spaces are accessible. One of the things that we have picked up is even though there is green spaces, there's a kind of perception that the green spaces are not the green spaces that you want to access. So that's a quite important thing, because no point having a sort of an important asset locally if people aren't using it. The other key part of looking at infrastructure, particularly in London, is if we look at sort of access to transport systems. And what we have is the public transport accessibility level, which is a measure for London. And it goes from 0, which is no access to public transport, or to 6, which fundamentally is central London, and the level of public transport that we have. Now, in this area, it's 1B, which means that transport access is generally poor. Now, I know that in terms of the wider area, there will be some parts of this particular area where transport is much better than other areas, but it's taken on an average. The other key thing is things like air quality. And when we look at air quality, the whole of London is what we call an air quality management zone, which means that none of the air in London is at a level where we say it's not a health risk. And we know that, and this is the same across many sort of urban areas across the country. When we look at we measure it across 2 particular indicators, particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. All of that is really comes from vehicle emissions, and obviously our location to the airport and the infrastructure and travel to the airport does create potentials for air pollution. If we look at the borough in general, then what you find in this particular area is air quality is either comparable, well, it is comparable to in both areas, but that average area does disguise the fact that there are areas in the borough where there is significantly higher levels of air pollution. It is not particularly this area, but actually we've got 6 monitoring stations, and some of those monitoring stations are showing quite high levels, but not high levels where you would say that it's breaching any national standards. Then we looked at 3 different age groups. So the caveat for this is it's based on data that is recorded. Okay, so sometimes data isn't recorded in a way that we can compare. So again, it's about triggering conversation. So when we look at our health conditions, the 5 top health conditions for the 0 to 17, so young children, what we see is in this area, autism, asthma, ADHD, anxiety, and learning disabilities are the highest recorded conditions. And when we look at the comparisons across the borough, there is a sort of marginal difference with autism, slightly lower levels of asthma, higher levels of ADHD, high levels of anxiety, and comparable levels of learning disability. When we look at children continued. This is a new slide that we've added in. This is about childhood obesity. This has been picked up a lot in some of our other forums. This is reception year. So what we had to have is 2 statutory measures, and many of you would have been parents, what we call the National Child Measurement Programme. It's a weighing and measuring programme where all children at reception and all children at year 6 are weighed and measured, and that gives us comparison levels of obesity in different areas, but across the country. None of you will be surprised to know that the level of obesity amongst children is increasing year on year. There is no area in the country that's bucking the trend on this. So when we look at underweight children, we've got high numbers of underweight children in this particular area compared to the rest of Hounslow, and higher rates of children who are overweight, but fewer children who are obese. Now I just want you to look at the levels of the scale on the side, and when we look at that level of scale on the side, we're looking at sort of at that more overweight at 12% or just over 12%. Now what's really important here is that when we look at year 6, and this is a pattern that we see everywhere, suddenly the levels of obesity jump significantly. So while the underweight group remained pretty much the same, when we start looking at overweight and obesity, suddenly we've got sort of 16% and 22%, which is really, really considerable jump. So we know that something happens between that early years, so we're getting it right in the early years, but something about year 6, by the time we get to year 6, children's weight is getting significantly unhealthy. Now what we don't do is measure children round about 15 or 16. And what I would say is if we did, we would notice an even greater increase, particularly amongst girls. And that's a well understood evidence base for that. It's just that we don't have the data to compare, but we know it's a problem. When we look at what we call working age adults, and in the same sort of the same measures, these are the top 5 conditions compared to the rest of the borough. Strangely, smoking was higher. That really surprised me. Depression, anxiety, obesity, and a comparable level of hypertension. So that's high blood pressure. So there is some sort of strange measures that are going on here that you wouldn't expect to see in this particular area compared to the rest of the borough. So that's a piece of work that we're doing to try and sort of understand and sort of really drill down into this wider area to see if there are pockets of concern, to see what the data says in general about where we need to focus some resources, particularly on smoking, because that's the single most important sort of modifiable action that we can take to really, really improve health. And with the kind of with the government's commitment to reduce smoking and quite a significant investment that's coming our way, this is an area that personally I think we need to do much more in. When we look at the over 65 age group, again we're comparing this area to the rest of the borough, and what we see is high blood pressure is a comparable level. The non-diabetic hyperglycemia. Now that is pre-diabetes, so that's people who aren't diagnosed with diabetes but have high sugar levels. And that's a really sort of interesting proxy measure of those people who will later become sort of type 2 diabetic if they're not, if there's no intervention. And then we see a little bit lower levels of diabetes compared to the rest of the borough. You expect to see relatively high levels of diabetes in quite diverse communities, so that's what we would expect to see. Comparable levels of obesity, and then chronic kidney disease, which is something that as we get older, it is a condition that we tend to see more of. And I think I'm going to pass back to Stephen.
So just to round up, that's some of the data. And I go back in terms of where Kelly said about the younger years, because what happens in people's younger years is fundamentally important to how the rest of your health and well-being plays out in your adulthood, but also, quite importantly, it also relates to your life chances. So what we have in Hounslow, and it's not on the information there, is about 20% of our children come to the first year in school, reception class, as we would call it technically, not ready for school. And that's not ready to learn. That's simple things like not being able to sit up in a chair because they haven't developed a core muscle strength. It's not being able to pay attention because they haven't been in that environment, that structured environment. It's not being able to share with other children because they've not had that social interaction. It's not being able to verbalize their words because they haven't had an environment where they've grown up and been surrounded by people who will read to them, will sing with them, all those things that we can all probably remember. And why that matters quite so much is there is not a single simple service solution to that. What our schools do is, for that 20% of children, spend about the first 12 to 18 months enabling those children to learn, and then by about the second year of primary school, they're learning. But that is about a year lost. It is a year lost to learning. The good news is that our children make it up. So when they come to the time where they sit their GCSEs and we measure progression and attainment, the children in Hounslow broadly achieve at or above national level. But then what we also find is that when you look at the data, our young people, when they go into the job market, whether they go straight from school after mandatory school age or they do a small apprenticeship or whatever, and it's what's called getting your first real job. So we all can probably remember that we all did part-time jobs and bit jobs as we were getting into adulthood. But what really matters is a job that's called your first real job. And for some unknown reason, the young people and children in Hounslow take about twice as long to secure that real job. And I can only correlate that to some of that disadvantage that comes from that early years bit. And we provide a whole range of services across the council and the NHS that seek to tackle some of that early years stuff. We do it through our children's centres, family hubs, the health visiting service. But it isn't addressing some of that lost ability, that readiness to learn. So for me, it is that then just comes down to that what we see in Hounslow is we are the second lowest wage economy in London. Only the people of Barking and Dagenham, on average, earn less than the people of Hounslow. And if all that built-in disadvantage and that time lagging for our young people is part of that, what we could perceive about seeing is if we were able to defeat that lost bit of ready to be at school, our children, if they make the distance, make it up by the time they come to their exams. Not would they just be attaining at national and equal, they would be flying. And they'd be in a much better economic place to secure those much better jobs. And that would mean the difference potentially on average wage of about an extra 4 or 5 grand a year in their pockets. And to go back to what Kelly said, your life chances are improved, your health is improved in your adulthood, in your 20s and 30s and 40s, for your older years, in your 60s and 70s, if you are economically strong. So whilst we, as professionals, spend a lot of time trying to get those services to target some of that stuff, the conversation I probably want to throw back quite cheekily into this room is, what can all of you do in your local community to help us defeat that bit at the very start, where our children don't come to school in the numbers that we want ready to learn? What can we do alongside you, and what can you do as community groups or local people to enable those children to soar? And that's the challenge of health and well-being. It's not just about access to services, it's about defeating some of those things that are rooted in our society. And if we were able to make that change, and I'm allowed to be aspirational at the end of a week, is that we would see our children flying. We would see them in the high-powered jobs, bringing that money back into the borough, and in essence, benefiting everybody. So at that point, I will stop, because I can get quite passionate about this stuff, and I'll leave it open to the chair to ask any questions and anybody else.
Yeah, thank you, both of you. What happens now is normally is we'll offer councillors the opportunity for questions, and then throw it over to yourselves one at a time. There'll be a microphone. Please make sure that you speak with the microphone, and then you'll be recorded that way. And anybody, Councillor Stroud-Turp.
Yep, thanks very much for that. And particularly that last bit, Stephen, which is hopefully is where we're heading. But I just want to come back to the statistics that you put. The most worrying one, I thought, was that it's the year 6 overweight and obesity, 38% when you add them both together. Year 6, so that's just before they start senior school. It's the last year. 11, 10 to 11-year-olds. So 10 to 11-year-olds, you've got 38% who are overweight. And clearly, some of that is what happens at home. Some of it's lifestyle choice, but quite often not by the children. Lifestyle choice made by parents. And that's about diet, exercise, etc. And the worrying thing is, this is a national trend, but it's going to pull through. It's not going to stay in year 6. How do we tackle this and stop these 38% of obese year 6, 10, 11-year-olds becoming obese and overweight 20, 22, 23-year-olds who, and it plays back to your point, Stephen, whose life's chances are going to be damaged by that? Do we have some, I know it's a national problem, but is there anything we're doing locally?
A number of things that we have been doing is what we call a whole systems approach, is looking at infrastructure in each of the areas. And you need to look at infrastructure at small area level to look at, are children feeling safe and able to play? Is there access to parks and leisure facilities that are affordable? And a really, really important one, because the commercial sort of interest, is that what we see is access to unhealthy food, advertising of unhealthy food, access to unhealthy food, and this is predominantly in areas that are more deprived. So when you look at kind of commercially, that fast food locations and the advertising of food that is high in fat and sugar is really targeted at more deprived communities. The other thing that we're doing is we've invested quite a significant amount in what we call Healthy Hounslow. This is a lifestyle service that's supported by sort of a wellbeing service that motivates people to kind of recognise where they need support and intervention. But the really key thing that we are doing, because we know that a lot of people will be motivated to do that themselves, but what we're desperately trying to do is make sure that those people who are physically inactive become a little bit more active, rather than focus on those people who are already sort of out and about and probably able to do it themselves. But it really does require that really sort of really quite important understanding of sort of right from the outset, parents really understand what drives obesity, and it isn't just food in and walking and physical activity. It's much more complex than that. And when we look around the borough, certainly for us as a council, we could do more in terms of thinking about fast food and access to fast food. When we look at schools, we could do a lot more in terms of making sort of healthy catering options in schools available, and particularly things like sort of water-only schools. So there's a lot of things that we are doing, but in terms of turning it around so it makes a real difference, there needs to be a real whole-scale change. And that's something that is on our agenda that we're trying to do, but it's taking significantly longer than we had hoped for.
And I think just to pick up what Kelly said, it is often the little things that make a huge difference, little things that become habits. So I was having a conversation with some young people a couple of weeks ago, and it was things like, get off the bus if you can, one stop earlier, and walk the difference. You know, if you can, walk a little bit more than you did yesterday. It's not about having to go to the gym 5 times a week and whatever. It is just those little habits that if you can do it, helps. And if children build that into their habits, their way of being, then it layers down good habits for the future.
Okay, any other councillors? Tom, Bruce?
Thank you. Couple of things. There was one of the slides where this area had the proportion, the number slightly bigger than the Hounslow average, and your comment to that was that surprised you, and I'm just wondering, I'm just exploring that a little bit more, why that surprised you. What is it about this area that you expected it to be lower, but it wasn't? And my second one is, as well as being a councillor, I'm a teacher, and we have... Was that me? No. I think it's shut up, Councillor. No. The other thing that we've started saying, and I think not glibly, but kind of it's become part of the parlance that, oh, you know, that's because of COVID. The thing that we're experiencing in that year group is, oh, they were in this year group during COVID, or this age group were born or were young during COVID. So I just wonder whether there's any of that sort of information that's available, that you've done work on, that overlays into that, and particularly school readiness. I mean, it's a big, Stephen knows, it's a big thing for me, that school readiness, that 0 to 5 particularly. But I just wonder whether, in a broad sense, whether we see any of those trends because of COVID.
Councillor, I think you were talking about referring to smoking levels. Yeah, so smoking levels are higher, and what you tend to see is that smoking levels in more diverse populations, the more deprived a population, the higher the levels of smoking. And actually what we're looking at in terms of those first indicators is that the relative affluence of this particular area is well, the area is more affluent than the rest of Hounslow. So you would expect to see, if smoking rates are higher in more deprived areas, I would have expected to see it lower than the average. So given that we've got quite significant investment that's come our way for the next 5 years in smoking, there needs to be a bit of work that we need to do to drill down, because actually by taking this as a whole area, what we're probably hiding is that there may be certain areas within this wider patch where we just need to make sure that access to stop smoking services is available. In terms of the COVID, I'll be honest, as a director of public health, at the time keeping children home away from school was the right thing to do, but on hindsight, a lot of children have had significant increase in anxiety and mental health conditions. We know that from the national data. There's no disguising that, and a lot of children, particularly around sort of access to school and children who now don't go to school, we know that is part and parcel of their experience. So there's lots of socialization and sort of what we would see as normal child development that was delayed as a result of that. So the right thing at the time to close schools, but on hindsight there is a population group that is significantly affected, which we need to turn around. And it's not just children, it's adults as well.
It was me, but in disguise. And the one area I think that is really noticeable, there's an awful lot of media attention comes and goes about children not in school because parents take them out on holidays. That's not an area I have a great concern about. What I do have a great concern about, and it is directly linked to COVID, we can see it, is a perception that for many children going to school regularly is not the done thing. So our levels of persistent absence, and more worryingly for me in primary rather than secondary, nationally and locally are creeping up and up and up. So persistent absence is 50% or less, and we have about at the moment 100 children in the borough. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the school population is only 47,000 that are actually persistently absent from school. There is another group which have a regular level of absence, which is about 80-odd%, which is a much higher number. And that, again, doesn't sound like a lot, but the way that schools, and I'm not going to tell Councillor Bruce how teachers work and lesson planning works, but it's really difficult to keep up if you're consistently missing a day a week. It's a really difficult to keep up, and that knocks your confidence, it knocks your ability, and all of that, if you look at Kelly's graph, start to feed into people in their 20s and 30s with anxiety. You know, it sounds like a very new thing to talk about is self-esteem, but self-esteem matters when you're trying to get a job. It matters about your confidence, and if your experience at school has not been a good one, because you're absent a lot, it really plays into that. So all of these things in the early years fundamentally affect us growing adults, job opportunities, and health, as Councillor Stroud-Tupp was saying. If you're already overweight, your chances of being diabetic by the time you get to 20 are much higher, and your chances by the time you're 40 and 50 of your diabetes having some life-limiting impacts on you significantly increase. So dealing with these things at the early years is really the place for us. And we talk about a generational change. If we were to throw everything we had at the 4 and 5 years olds now to try and defeat that, we could see a significant difference in 20 years' time. And that seems like a long time, but that would mean a big difference for all of our children and our community in totality.
Good. I'll take it there's no other councillors want to ask questions. I'll just ask one myself. What is the ideal minimum distance from a fast food takeaway from a school? We lost an appeal on a 400 metres a little while back on London Road. Tell us what you think it is, and whether there is room for an Article 4 of the Planning Act directive to limit these kind of food emporia.
In an ideal world, as far away as possible, but we live in an urban area. So what planning policies where they have been introduced, sort of addendums to planning guidance, it's usually about 300 metres. Usually about 300 metres where that has been passed. But what I would say is that some fast food businesses, particularly the international ones, and there's a lot of media attention around their ability to bring in their big gun solicitors to actually tackle this. A lot of them have won cases, the fast food industry have won cases against local authorities where local authorities have tried to restrict takeaways or fast food industry from locating where they want to locate. It's a very, very difficult thing to actually put in place.
All right, thank you. Right, I know there's a few people who wants to ask a question rather than make statements. Who wants to ask a question? And don't forget we've got an agenda. I know we've kind of run it a little bit far. Sorry. I was going to ask. You had your hand up first earlier on. Do you want to ask a question? Hang on. Microphone. Thank you.
Gentleman earlier about granting planning permission or approval for fast food, because there's absolutely shed loads of them in the whole borough of Hounslow, many of them near schools. So why in the first place, if you're so bothered about obesity, you're granting these licenses? And also vape shops. Now vaping is the new smoking for youngsters. They're springing up everywhere as well. They're obviously having to have permission from council to open. So why are you giving them the clear light to open up?
Okay, thanks. Thanks. That's a couple. Do you want to take 2 or 3 questions at a time? Don't forget that that's a good idea on the vape shops. I think there is a good answer to that. Mrs. McAvoy.
I get named. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I was actually going to make the same point about fast food outlets, because I was quite shocked actually driving around near Bush Corner that you've got 2 high performing secondary schools, the Green School for girls and the Green School for boys. And I was quite shocked, actually, to see a whole mass of those pupils lining up outside the fast food outlet at Bush Corner. I mean, I was quite shocked, and I thought, well, this is not good for the future. But that somebody else has asked that question about how we can limit that. The issue about reading, babies should be read to, actually. You start with them when they're babies. And I'm just wondering, you do have a lot of women from ethnic minorities who are living in a very isolated world, actually, as well as other women. And I just wondered whether you'd ever considered setting up reading groups that are run by women so that those women would feel more comfortable going, so that they could bring their children. I mean, you may be doing this already, I don't know, so that you could bring those children, or they could bring these children, to a friendly area where somebody whose English was good could sit and help them read to their children.
Thank you. Next, one more. Janet Clark, former teacher.
Yes, I don't know how much the borough can sort of work with the teaching profession, but this thing of the obesity levels increasing in year 6, to me, one of the things is down completely to year 6 working towards the year 6 SATs and not having a balanced curriculum. Sometimes it even takes up children's lunch breaks and all sorts of breaks. So that is one thing that I would see from the earlier years into year 6, is that the children are just not, it doesn't happen in every school, but it does happen in some schools, that they are just not getting the balanced curriculum and not getting the sort of games and PE and so on that they used to get earlier on.
Thanks. And just one more, Peter Gordon over there.
Council tax today.
Good.
But in there was an information leaflet. Kelly, quite interesting, it says on smoking, we have helped 500 people stop smoking. With the amount of money and effort, do you think that figure is a little bit too low, or do you think that that was a good target? It seems to me to be low. A comment, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Do you remember those 4 questions, comments? Thank you.
So I'll start with the planning. Yeah, we could tighten up on the planning. That's an area that I think that we can take back to actually sort of deal with. I am concerned about children's vaping. That's one of the areas that the new smoking grant is going to cover, particularly because vaping does have a place, but not with children. It is a harm reduction intervention that supports people who are established smokers to quit. It is not something that non-smokers should be doing. So this is an area that we do need to tighten up. There isn't any legislation about that at present. Just in terms of picking up Peter's comment about low levels, or sort of low quitting numbers, every single person that smokes is a really tough gig to get them, because the level of investment and the level of work that's done to bring down the massive smoking levels. If you think back to the kind of, when I think back to sort of my childhood in the 70s, and don't work it out, everyone smoked. It's only when I left home that I realised that my parents, that I just stunk like an ashtray the whole time. But so did everybody else. But when you think about that, it's been relatively easy over the years to reduce the smoking prevalence. But now we have a real, quite literally a die-hard group of smokers. These are, every time we get a quitter, it's a really important, it's, just one is taking quite a significant amount of investment. So when we look at kind of 500, that's a really tough gig to actually get. So working really, really hard to try and do that. Do I think it's low? Of course I think it's low. I think that no one should be smoking, because as I say, it's the single most modifiable factor that really destroys health. And you can, and there will always be someone that argue, well, my grandma lived till they were 97 and they smoked 60 a day. That is the exception. Most people who smoke and will experience all of those long-term conditions that make you unhealthy, and they will drain the services. So the NHS, they will be long-term users of the NHS services. Picking up on working towards that, I'll let Stephen talk about the working towards SATs. I do think that school used to be a place where there was lots of physical activity, and now if we are focusing on sort of academic attainment, that is a positive thing, but it should not be at the detriment of health. You can talk about reading groups. I think it's a really good point about reading groups. We do have reading groups, but I would say that probably we're not supporting women from whose first language isn't English, for example, or women who feel slightly less included. And that's something I will take away, because I think that's a really good suggestion. Thank you.
It is a good suggestion, because I have the adult education service in my department, and I have a responsibility to work with schools, and I have the children's centres and the family hubs in my department. So we do run reading and engagement classes in the children's centres and the family hubs. It's targeted at a very specific group of young mums and dads because of the support need. It could be wider, but then we get into the issue, it costs a bit more, working within limited resourcing for the family hubs. But we have an opportunity, because there is, I only found out a year and a bit ago, even though I've had adult education for 5 years, that there is a course that we run called The Sounds of English, which is for mothers and fathers who English is a second language, but we don't connect that to our family centres. So what I need to do is find a way of connecting the two together, so that we're dealing with young children and mum and dad at the same time in the same place. It's really difficult if your teacher at school is giving you some homework or getting you to involve, but actually you're going home and talking another language, because you're not experimenting with the sounds of English and the shapes of the words, and that's really important. But to do that, you have to come to school able to control your facial muscles. So things like blowing bubbles, singing songs, prepare you to learn to speak. And what I will say, because I keep forgetting about it, is we have a fantastic app on the council's website called 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. I have it on my phone. I always encourage councillors to download it. I've never checked their phones, so 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 on the council's website, councillors. If you go to the website, it has 50 things that a 5-year-old should be doing, can do, that are either free or really dirt cheap, need a little bit of squishy washing up liquid and whatever to blow bubbles. And all those things contribute to preparing that child ready to learn. And there are things that can be done at home. Singing, dancing. Why dance? Because you learn to control your limbs, your muscles, you learn to have rhythm, and you learn to participate with someone else. All of that is really important. It's not about learning English, it's being ready. But I'll take away the reading thing. On the balanced curriculum, there was a change from Ofsted, who is the Inspectorate for Schools, about 6 years ago, where they went through a process of saying what was necessary in a school was a rich and balanced curriculum. There was a reason, I think, for Ofsted previously to focus on progression and attainment, because particularly in central London, progression attainment and academic attainment for children was not good 20 odd years ago. We now have in central London and London as a whole some of the best levels of progression and attainment across England. But the bit of the move to that rich and rounded curriculum got a bit lost, and then the pandemic came along, and it quite hasn't found its way into the inspection regime as deep as I thought it would go. And no matter what we say about national curriculum and all the things that the government sets out from the Department for Education, what really does matter for schools is what Ofsted says.
Thank you.
So we need to encourage Ofsted to change that a little to get back to that balanced and rich curriculum.
Thanks very much to both of you. Thank you for the questions. To contribute further, either look at the council website. You've got some papers, paper copies of ways to respond, and also maybe look in the libraries too, where we're consulting on this too. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your questions. We've overrun that a little bit, but it was probably worth it. But we're waiting for these youngsters as well to come down and for their takeover, changing the narrative. So thanks very much. would you, sorry, Kelly, Stephen, would you vacate your seats? By all means, come and sit in the audience and let these gentlemen occupy those spaces. Thank you.
Hello.
So there's, let me introduce you. There's a fellow up there. His name is Simon Fisher. He's one of the co-heads of Isleworth and Zion School, and Mr. Proctor, who's a colleague. And Simon lives in the ward, comes to area forums, and we've talked before about getting youngsters involved, and we've got the most established senior school in the ward here, or in the area here, and he said, we'll bring a couple of students along to present. So we've got, maybe you could introduce yourselves. I know your names, Ollie and Shah Jahan, but you can tell us what you do, and then kick into your presentations, gentlemen. They've got slides, haven't they, Yag? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So firstly, hi everyone. I'm Ollie. I'm a Year 12 student. Isleworth and Zion School. I have been regularly part of the student leadership team in trying to promote more positive engagement within communities and societies by offering sports clubs, suggestions at student council, and things like that. So my speech today is just going to be essentially just what Isleworth and Zion are trying to do in order to improve the conceptions of young people within society. My colleague next to me is?
So my name is Shah Jahan, and I'm also going to be adding, I suppose, a bit on to Ollie's speech. And so I'm also going to be talking a bit about how our school is working to lay roots in the community and work with the community to nurture and build stronger bonds and long-lasting partnerships.
Okay, so I think I should probably kick us off. So firstly, we at Isleworth and Zion, we are dedicated to embedding core British values amongst all our students from Year 7 to Year 13. And I'm here to talk to you today about the misconceptions that society has surrounding teenagers and antisocial behaviour and their involvement in that. And so we aim to challenge and alter these preconceptions in a more positive light. Let me begin by admitting that we all have less than perfect ideas about the community. You have a conception of me from the way I'm talking to you right now, and vice versa. Many people from older demographics have an opinion almost implanted in them that that all young generations are involved in violence, gangs, crime, or antisocial behaviour in general of any kind. And speaking from my view, as an older teenager, I can assure you that this is not the case for the vast majority of people. I speak with confidence about my friends, peers, and teachers as well, who have dreams, aspirations, and ambitions for our futures. And I've experienced these types of stories firsthand. These people who work tirelessly to be the very best version of themselves and make our school and communities a safer and happier place for everyone. This is what we miss, even if it appears in plain sight. It's part of the iceberg we do not see. We, as a society, are so focused by the idea that teenagers are a part of antisocial behaviour that it is no surprise to us when we see it. However, this is not what we should be focusing on, and instead I urge you to open your eyes to the reality and know the truth and the true side of teenagers like me and plenty others, like my good friend Shah Jahan. And just to acknowledge those who go completely under the radar in the work they do to make society and local communities safer and happier for you and I. On top of this, the effort that not only Isleworth and Sion have made, but also all communities that I'm a part of, my rugby and cricket societies and clubs, as well as other local schools, the effort they have made to allow me to flourish and to bloom into the young gentleman I am today is unmatched. I am forever grateful for their belief in my abilities and their help to instill core values of acceptable behaviour and a sense of belonging within all communities, not just in myself, but also all those I've had the privilege of being a part of. As you can see, the majority of young individuals are hardworking, ambitious, and goal-driven, promising a life of courage and success before them. And their contributions to our society shall not go unnoticed. And it is time we open our eyes to the reality of young people in our communities and how they aid others, contribute in positive ways, and offer ideas for a cleaner, safer, and happier society for us all. Thank you for your time. That's me done. I'll stop yapping on now. Thank you very much.
So, talking a little bit now about how our school is working to change that narrative and is working with the local community to better it. Our students have been involved in an array of projects with the local community. That includes bringing elderly people in and improving their technical skills with machinery, computers. That includes reading clubs, where older students are assigned to younger years, I believe ranging from year 7 to 9, and we work and we read with them to improve their literacy skills. That includes our sports leaders at our school working with local clubs of younger children and refereeing their games and helping them build a strong spirit of sportsmanship and honourable play. And really that's what the goal is with our school and changing the narrative. It's through action that we intend to improve the community and better not only our students, but also work towards building a better future for the community as a whole.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions? Councillor Shaheen.
Well, thank you very much for that contribution. I think you both spoke very eloquently, and you made a very convincing argument, and I now firmly believe that you are not deserving of an ASBO. I think you definitely aren't engaging in antisocial behaviour. In fact, I think you were so convincing you would do well in politics, but don't expect that to improve your reputation.
I did say that to him earlier on. I said, don't go into politics. Next, Councillor Siddiqui.
Thank you very much. I think very excellent contribution. And as you said, old people were brought into your school. I was the one once brought in by Mr. Simon to the school, and I really enjoyed my time there. It was it was excellent. I think in terms of general perception, I would say a lot of youngsters are brought up by their parents, and generally I would say from the generation we are, but we don't think all the children are basically in kind of negative habits or part of gang and everything. If that's the case, this whole society will be in chaos, and we are not in chaos. We are a very good society. We do respect each other, and from perspective of a generation before you or twice before you, basically, I would say we really we thrive in when we see you guys growing, basically, because our say achievement is your good future. And all these people sitting here basically are vested in your good future. So I think it's a bit of conception that the elder generation feels like that, but probably we don't. I think it's just a lot of it is made in media, where one incident in terms of a young individual is teleported, and then it reflects to the entire young community, which should not be the case. That one incident and that one even does not define the entire young community we have, basically. And, you know, it's a pleasure to be sort of, you know, at different schools talking to young people. And I think we have complete confidence that we are in good hands. Our future is in good hands. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Stradturp.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, guys. That was brilliant. One of the things I just wanted to ask your view on, it's generally recognised that teenagers were invented in about the 1950s, or the teenage culture started then, and pretty much it's had ups and downs since then. But it seemed, and there's always been a fear of some of the teenage cultures, whether that's going back to the teddy boys or skinheads or whatever it happened to be. But it just seems that we've hit a period now in our society where the level of suspicion of teenagers, now whether that's through social media, seems to have been magnified even more. I mean, from your perspective as teenagers, what do you think's driving that particular amplification of people's general distrust or worry about teenagers?
So that can be due to a variety of factors. One of those could be what's in fashion right now in terms of the dress of teenagers, especially the full black, face covered. That in itself results in high suspicion. But then there's also the case of I don't think the older people interact as much as teenagers, especially if they don't have children, or more so they don't interact with teenagers other than their own children. And what that does is it makes it sort of an unknown. You have your kids, and then you have this other that's potentially a danger to you and your children. And so I suppose a way to reduce that fear and that anxiety around young people is to increase the amount of interaction they have with older people. And you can do that through joint clubs. You can do that through meet and greet events and things of the like.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it stems from social media use, as you were saying. I think that plays a huge role in what people perceive teenagers are, because that's the demographic that social media is mainly focused towards. I think once teenagers receive bits of information here and there from multiple sources on these social media websites and apps, it gives them a sort of character that they sort of want to follow, and those characteristics may be harmful or seen as harmful by others. And I think, I don't know about whether teenagers are just because of their social media use, maybe, but I also think that the way that it's potentially dealt with in terms of the social media that is available to them, so harmful content, all of that sort of short form stuff, that I think has a detrimental effect on the teenagers' health, and I think that's what some put into society, and I think it's about controlling that in order to try and stem the flow of teenagers being perceived as dangerous or as unsociable, antisocial, those sorts of characteristics. I think that's where it stems from.
Thank you, Ollie. Councillor Sampson.
I just want to ask you your opinion, your views on both of you. As you attend a school in the London Borough of Hounslow, I'm not sure if you live in the borough, but how safe do you feel on the streets of Hounslow as young people?
Firstly, I think I feel very safe. That might just be how, that's just special to me. That's personal. But I do think that there is a lot of law enforcement. There's a lot of help that I can go to if I need it, whether that be mentally or physically. There's a lot of services and opportunities open for me to discuss these problems with appropriate individuals. And I think that going to a school in Hounslow and living in Hounslow, I think I've almost grown accustomed to it, so I know this what the society is, and I know, how to act, stay out of trouble. But I do think that with the amount of law enforcement, amount of services that is available to a lot of people, including myself, I think I feel very strongly about safety, and I think that a lot of people can share that view.
So I have a slightly different experience with the matter. For me, it depends really where and when. What you tend to find is the areas, shopping centers and high streets tend to be more dangerous than, say, residential areas. And it's really, they feel less safe because that tends to be where the epicenters of crime are. And so as a result, not so much during the daytime, but especially as it gets darker, in those areas, it starts to, your skin sort of starts to crawl, and it just makes people less willing to be out. Especially, I suppose, as it gets darker earlier.
You got a brief supplementary, Councillor Sampson.
Just very brief. What do you think the council could do to engage better with the youths that are disengaged, if you like?
So, firstly, I think offering youth clubs, I think that's a huge part. It gives a place for younger generations to go and socialise, meet like-minded people, make new friends, and I think that sort of will deter them from a life of crime and drugs and gangs and all that sort of stuff. I think setting up those would have a huge positive impact on not only their health, but I also think the health of the public as well. I think it will make people feel safer. And I also think introducing not necessarily youth clubs, but if there's a way of more sporting activities or more public provisions in terms of parks where you can go and you can make that social, you can socialise and you can play the sports that will help increase and improve your mental health, I think that will really, really change the tide in that respect.
So in that regard, really it's a matter of, especially with disengaged youths, it's a matter of, on some level, enforcing their engagement, at least initially. And that might be something like having children in detention help with some local initiative. Or that might be having police officers come in, just local police officers, to talk about their work. And it's a matter of sort of making them feel part and making them feel as if they have a stake in the community around them. Because it's a lot easier to harm and damage some vague idea of other than it is to harm someone you know and a community where you know the people.
Can I quickly just add on to that as well?
Very quickly. Go on. We've got more questions to answer, a couple more questions to answer from the audience shortly, but yeah, go on.
Also, just adding on to that, Shah makes a point about getting people in, so police officers discussing their work. That also creates the role models as well that maybe some of these individuals lacking. And on top of that, I remember reading a statistic somewhere that if placed in some sort of confinement, whether that be prison or juvenile detention centre, I think there's something like 48% people re-offend, whereas in Greenland, where they actually have areas where the victim can meet the persecutor, they actually have far less re-offending rates. And I think that's something that we can really drive and really push within society, is try and get more engagement, as Shah was saying, not only between law enforcement individuals, but also between the victim and the persecutor. And maybe whether they feel safe doing that or not, that's up to them. But I think it's an idea to put forward.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. A couple of questions from the audience. We've got Peter up there, and we've got Barbara here, and there'll be more time at some point to engage with Isleworth and Zion School, I'm sure. Peter. That Peter up, no, not you, Peter. You know the boys already. Peter up the top there.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Very, very interesting. One, just a political point, and this is just me, but I'm probably controversial. I do think it would be nice if the central government got rid of tuition fees for you and give you some commitment, but there you go. I'm interested as well in your views on the use of smartphones in schools, because there's a debate clearly going on at the minute that they're not actually that particularly good for education, and I'd be interested in what your views are.
And then Barbara, your question, and we'll ask the lads to respond. Thanks.
Yes, I wanted to congratulate you on your presentations. I think it's brilliant that you're here and speaking to us. I wanted to raise an environmental issue. I hate litter. I organise litter picks in the area. I'm sure that neither of you would litter. I think there might be a small minority of your students in your school who might do that. Is there anything that the school does or anything that you could do to try and stop littering? You know what the environment looks like. We've got so much litter around, it really is awful. Is anything being done, or can you do anything else?
Sorry, just go on that, Peter, there, Mr. Proctor. A quick one, but only if it's going to assist the lads with their response.
Sorry, it links perfectly with that last question. Your year 12s, you're nearing the end of your journey at Isleworth and Sion. I think it'd be really interesting just to know what's one thing you would like to see the school do within the community as well, whether it's litter picking or something broader. We're looking to develop our role and our relationship, and you are our best example. So tell us what you would like to do as well.
Good question. All right. Gentlemen, be brief. I know we've got a long night. Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
So I'm going to start with the topic of the litter first. So I believe it was a number of years ago, but our school took part in a program which was essentially to earn things called Green Flag Awards. And to do so, you had to arrange a series of environmentally improving campaigns. So students took multiple evenings to pick up litter. We planted trees in the local area. We spread awareness about the environment, and so what the ultimate point of that was at the end you would earn a green flag and be recognized as a school that works towards these goals. And I think really it's a matter of spreading programs like that and making schools and I suppose community hubs more aware that things like these exist. Because doing things is great, but being recognized for them on a national scale serves as better motivation to do that. And I feel the Green Flags program is very useful to that end. And what was the first question? Smartphones. So I'm a bit of an extremist on this matter. I'm very much against the use of smartphones during lessons. Because what you find, especially now, and it's becoming more and more common, is students recording each other, putting it on the internet, cases of bullying taking place and those being put on the internet. And the matter is, once it's on there, it's never going off. Because bullying is bad already when it's happening, but it's even worse if it's on show for the entire world. And what you find is that the comments on those videos usually tend to be very cruel. And that's something now that person has to live with, essentially indefinitely. So I'm very much against the use of smartphones. I suppose an argument can be made for their use for research in lessons. But similarly, a lot of schools have things like Chromebooks and so on that they can use instead of personal smartphones. And as for things I would like our school to do more of, I think really getting involved more so with the older people in our community and adults and working with them in tandem and hand in hand towards achieving certain goals. For example, the example of the environment, you might do a community litter pick where students work with people in the local community, just to throw out an example.
Yeah, I was going to add on to Shahjahan's point, being about the litter picking in particular. I think what will drive students more, if they get rewarded for doing a litter pick, and it may not need to be a big reward, even if it's something like you get to skip the queue at lunchtime. Something like that really appeases to year nine children. You'll be surprised. But I think that something like that will, like Shahjahan said, will give them that motivation in order to do it. And I think that is something that we can really push as a school, whether that's done in school or in the wider community. And I think as well, with the smartphone issue, I am very, very against the use of smartphones. I think you are in school to learn, not to play on your smartphone. And sure, there are some instances where, you know, you might need to take a picture of a worksheet or a homework that you need to do for the next lesson. And that case, you know, the teacher will say, get out your smartphones, you can take a picture of this, and then smartphones away. And there is a policy at school we have where if the smartphone is seen, heard, or used, it is taken away. And I agree with that policy. I think there probably needs to be more enforcement of that policy. The amount of times I see students on their phones and then refusing to hand it in, or teachers saying, you know, I see your phone, put it away before I confiscate it. I think that's a real big issue. If the rule is it's not to be seen, heard, or used, and it is, and it breaches that rule, then I think the sanctions need to be taken. And that will help drive down the misuse of the mobile phones within school.
Look, thank you very much. I don't know. Did you find that useful? Good. Would you welcome more youngsters to the area forum at some other time? Okay. Got a couple more schools in the ward, big schools in the ward. We've even got the odd little one as well. All right, thank you. In the area, not just in the ward. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks very much. He wants us to meet again at some point. It's Mr. Fisher. We'll come up to the school again, and we councillors also in the area are at your service if you need to, if you want to engage with us again. Is that all right? Do you agree? All right, good. Thank you. Join your team again, yeah. Thanks. Right, where are we? We're at the section here called Open Forum for questions from the public. We had some questions already submitted, and I can't remember which ones they were because they came in different orders, dribs and drabs. I've not got a lot of time again. Not got a lot of time. There's some interesting things that turned up, as you know, which we listened to. I've got some answers to questions here as well. But are there any questions that haven't been that people have got that they want to ask? And we'll pick up. I know Ms. Stevens wants to ask questions too. But we'll ask who's lady in the mask briefly, please.
What I wanted to ask is a general question. Given that the Labour government are planning to remove PIP from a number of people, or 1 million people, and many carers payment are related to that, what contingency plan are the council making when carers will be handing over their carees to you to look after?
Okay, I mean, I know we're not the government. Yes. We haven't heard anything yet apart from speculation until the Chancellor's statement next week.
Yes.
We can pick up on that, but I'm sure we've got the executive director for adult and children's services here. Can we leave that till I'm sure the council, if it needs to, will pick things up. but can we leave that until after an announcement, and we will share that with residents one way or another?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering what you're doing in your disaster level planning, because it is a disaster, and there will be millions of carers unable to care anymore. So you, under the Care Act, will have to pick up that bill one way or another, including
yes.
residential care.
Can we, as I said, can we look what, I can't speculate. I don't know if any other councillors here could speculate, but can we rest assured, we like when the cold weather came in, and we opened up libraries for people to stay, warm rooms, for example. We will work on, as best we can as a local authority, not to inconvenience people too much, and let's see what the government comes up. I think there might be, there was talk about PIP being mullered, if you like, but it seems like it's off the agenda now. But let's see what.
Definitely,
all right,
is not off the agenda.
All right. Well, it seems that it might not seem as harsh at the moment, but let's see if that's okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Lady next to you. If it's not about PIP.
This is actually really meant to be for the conservation officer. You've got an iconic Hounslow landmark, 300-year-old Grade 2 listed property, the London Apprentice Public House, and it's in the most appalling state of dereliction at the moment. They've had to remove the name board from the top of the pub because they were worried it would fall on someone and injure them. It's in a very, very dilapidated state, and I just wondered if the conservation officer was aware of the state of it and what they were doing about it. I was told a year ago that they were going to start renovations in September, and then I was told just after Christmas they were going to start in February. They still haven't done anything, and I just wondered if there was some kind of, the brewery had some kind of hidden agenda, as they did have a planning application refused. They want to turn it into a gastro pub, but they have had the actually putting a roof on the exterior patio refused, thank goodness. But is anyone aware of what's happening with the pub? Or, as I say, once again, it is an iconic Hounslow landmark, and it needs to be, something needs to be done about it.
Okay, can you leave your details with Christopher there, please? And then, but is there any either any ward councillors know any? Okay, put your mic on if you like. Sorry. Okay, all right. Well, we'll come. Only if you promise to be very brief if you know what's going on. Will you? Okay. Very brief, because I'm going to cut you off in 30 seconds.
The conservation officer has no immediate concerns, but he is due during the spring to make a visit with Historic England to look at any buildings where he's been alerted that they may be at risk, and they will decide then. He has that on his list because I've asked for it to be so.
Oh, there you go. Okay, and I'm sure the local authority will be be pulled into it. Councillor Bruce as the lead member on planning, and which includes conservation. Yeah. Is that all right, Tom? Anything?
Absolutely. No, I wasn't aware of it either. When you say conservation, do you mean Sean? Is that who you're saying? You mean Sean? Right. I wasn't aware, but I will pick that up. So I'm really glad that you brought that up this evening. Thank you.
Is it okay if you share your details, your contact details are shared with Councillor Bruce? Okay, thank you. Next. Lady here. I'll pick up on, if you tell us your name as well.
Sir, Marion Huffer, and I live in Woodland Gardens, and I've only just realised that they are moving the bus stops at the bottom of St John's Road, and also in the Twickenham Road. We didn't have any publicity about this. We haven't been advised about this at all in Woodland Gardens. Obviously, the people in the bottom of St John's Road outside their houses will know about it, but why is there no...
All right, okay.
Why is there no publicity about this?
Let the lady finish.
Why is there no publicity about this? And also, you know, consultation on where the bus stops are going to go. Somebody said the one in Twickenham Road is going to go very near the mini roundabout, and this all seems, you know, very stupid a place to put it. So.
Okay, all right, thank you. Look, I know other people have come to talk about this. You can give your mic back if you like, not if you like, but would you give your mic back, please? I know other people have come to talk about this. We very briefly, Alison came to speak about, ask about it. But if you can be brief in what you've got to say. If it's a question, because we have got councillors from the ward who have been to, who have attended meetings. I think that you may have been at too. Ma'am, the lady behind you has been involved too.
Is that working? Oh. Alison Stevens. I'm representing Harcourt Gardens, Harcourt Close, the Sermon Arm Houses, Silverhall Street, North Street and Heartland Road. What criteria did LBH use in choosing the properties to be consulted regarding the bus stop removal and other alterations? For example, in a paper that we managed to get a hold of, 41 houses were consulted in Mill Platt, 1 in Gumley Gardens, and as our councillors are very aware, none of the properties in Silverhall Street, Harcourt Close, Sermon's Arm Houses, Heartland Road or the White Lodge Close area were consulted, despite the fact that these properties are the most affected. And Harcourt Close is less than 10 metres from the bus stop. There's also, today I had a meeting at Sermon's Arms Houses and they are very upset. This is an adverse and significant alteration and removes a direct link to other bus routes. TfL have stated to me that you, LBH, ratified this decision. The argument also issued by LBH to remove this stop is because the pavement is narrow. As somebody said to me, well, it doesn't comply with modern safety standards. So why is it that Richmond Council are not removing their narrow pathway bus stops on the same route? And why are you keeping the bus stop opposite? And why not remove the cycle lane so that you can widen the pavement and allow the majority of people to walk safely to the bus stop? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Can I pass this to Councillor John Stroud, please?
Alison, thanks very much for that. We've had a lot of conversations about this. First up, there are two issues, really. The first is why the bus stop's moving, and the second is the consultation. Let me deal with the consultation first. I think once we spoke to officers and you were there, the council put its hands up and says that was not the best consultation we've ever done. It wasn't done particularly well. We didn't talk to enough people, and it wasn't wide enough. And we've admitted that, and that is upfront. The second thing is, and we've learned lessons from that, but the other point to make about this, that statutory, there was no need to do a consultation. We did decide to do one. This bus stop is being moved under TfL's bus stop accessibility and safety improvement plan. They identify the bus stops in consultation with local councils, and you don't see it all the time, but particularly the westbound bus stop, the pavement is incredibly narrow, and it's even narrow on the other side outside Gumley School. And over the years, the number of complaints about those bus stops and the fact that you can't get past are constant and ongoing. One of the problems with both those bus stops is the width of the pavement. TfL's guidance is that you need 1.5 metres width of pavement. Now that's to allow the disabled ramp to come down, someone in a wheelchair or pushing a buggy, then to have room to turn onto the bus. Currently in London, every single day, there are 1.3 million journeys made by people with disabilities. There's 1.5 million journeys made with people with young children and pushchairs, and there's 700,000 journeys made by people over 75 who have mobility issues. 3.5 million journeys a day, 1.2 billion journeys a year, on the TfL bus network. And TfL and the council are absolutely dedicated to making buses as accessible as possible to everyone. That's why it's been done under that. Is it perfect? No, because what you're dealing with is a Victorian road structure which was never designed for that volume of traffic or that number of buses or indeed the size of buses. But there's one bus stop is moving, and that is the H37 bus stop, which is going round the corner into St John's Road. That does remove a interchange between the 267481 and H22, but that is the only interchange problem. There's also going to be a new pedestrian crossing put on Twickenham Road by the bus stop, which means crossing the road there is going to be much easier. Once again, it's not a perfect solution. You wouldn't design it like that if you had to lay out the roads to start with. Coming to the cycle lane, we heard earlier that we've got currently just children alone. We've got 38% of our Year 6 children are obese or overweight. We, as a council, TfL, are dedicated to improving active transport, whether that be walking or cycling. And if you stand around any of the primary schools, particularly in that area, the number of parents who are driving to their schools are far too many. If we can make cycling a safer and better option, I mean, people are shaking their heads, but it is a fact. If cycling is a safer option, people will be more confident to cycle to school with their children or walk.
Hang on.
Or
hang on, sorry, let Councillor finish, and then I'll allow a couple more questions on this, but yeah, there are other issues. But hang on one moment. John, if you can finish off, please.
I mean, basically, that addresses the cycle lane. There are going to be improvements to that cycle lane to make it even more accessible and better and safer for people to use to cycle. And hopefully the end result is going to be more people will cycle their children to school. Also, we're going to make those bus stops more accessible, and hopefully that will allow more people with disabilities, wheelchairs, and young families to use them. I was at a residents' meeting, St John's residents' meeting, last week, and an elderly gentleman there actually, contrary to what other people have said, did complain about that bus stop. He said he had real difficulties getting onto the bus in his wheelchair, and he actually welcomed the move. So it's not universally, by any stretch of the imagination, a move that is not welcomed by many residents. But I will take more questions.
Lady there, what's your name? Sally.
Wouldn't it be a much better compromise if you just took away that cycle lane where the buses have to come into? Like you get a cycle lane doesn't come from Hammersmith all the way down to Richmond or Twickenham. There are gaps in the cycle lanes. So why can't, instead of spending all this money and changing everything, why can't you just compromise and don't have the cycle lane where those bus stops are? You could use the cycle lane for the bus to pull into and get the wheelchairs off safely.
Sorry, John. Yeah, just one more, and then it's John, and then we'll finish on this, if that's all right. Not if that's all right. That's what I'd like to see, please.
Hi. My question was about St John's Road, the new bus stop.
Yep.
So it's within a few metres of another bus stop. So there are now 4 bus stops on St John's Road, and it's just going to hold up the traffic, make the bus journeys longer. And I was just astonished to find another bus stop when you can literally see the one that's currently there a few metres away. I don't know why there's another bus stop. That's not what the plan said. I don't think they are removing anything from St John's Road. Are they removing anything from St John's Road?
Right. Sorry, okay, let the lady there have the mic, and then we'll just...
Sorry, what was the answer to that, Councillor?
Well, okay, after this lady has spoken, thank you, I'm giving another shout on this subject, this lady over there.
The bus stop is right opposite my house. Oh, sorry, the bus stop is right opposite my house. I'm not happy, nor the people opposite me. In St John's Road, the one that's just bang opposite my house. You've taken the parking spaces away We haven't got enough spaces anyway. We've all got permits. Where are we going to park, and why have a bus stop in St John's Road that's going to block all the traffic? It already is. It's a nightmare.
Okay, thanks. Look,
And the people opposite me, I wish they were here tonight. I don't think they are.
Okay,
It's
all right.
right up to their driveway.
I've got... Madam, let's just finish off on this with the councillor. Thank you.
Okay, dealing with
We've got your comment, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. Well, all right. What you got to say, John, if you can respond to these.
The first question was the cycle lane.
Right, okay. Look, if you can...
Yeah, well, briefly, dealing with the cycle lane. Yes, of course, you can always take cycle lanes out at various points, but you end up with a disjointed cycle lane, and it then discourages people from using it. You want cycle lanes to be as continuous as possible. There's also a saying in the cycling community, which is absolutely true, which paint does not protect. Painted line does not protect cyclists. What we want, wherever we can get it, is hard cycle lanes put in. Now, we're not putting one in there because it would be too disruptive and take too much road and pavement. But wherever we can, we will put in the hard cycle lanes because we actually want, not people in Lycra on fast racing bikes, we want young families to be out cycling and cycling to school. And we will achieve that if we can build a safe cycling infrastructure. Turning to St John's Road, the reason that that's had to move, because the only safe place to put the bus stops for the 267, the 481 and the H22 were the other end. We're past the St John's Junction. There wasn't anything further towards the War Memorial, which means that the H37 coming down St John's Road would not be able to stop there. So that had to move there. We did get some issues from the businesses, and I forget the name of it, Brewery, Close, yep. And we did send a transport engineer to show them. They showed them the turning circles, and you can actually get vehicles out of there. The average time at a bus at that bus stop is about 30 to 45 seconds. So its impact on traffic will be minimal. Why it's been put in that spot? Because that is the most convenient spot to put it, because it also serves another function, which is to allow the girls from Gumley School to exit from the back and get onto that without having to walk further up St John's Road. I mean,
right, okay,
ladies and gentlemen,
okay.
there will be, there is a problem to every single solution, I'm afraid, and no solution is problem-free. This, and Alison, you stood with me while the transport engineers explained all the other solutions they'd looked at and why they were worse than this solution. And I'll put my hands up. Two things. We didn't get the consultation right. We will learn from it. And this is not a perfect solution. But it is the best solution that we can put in to meet TfL's requirements for an accessible and safe bus network in London, which is something we all want.
Ladies, any gentlemen, ladies, Councillor Stroud-Turp has explained this. He's happy to meet. He's happy to meet with yourselves to look at the issues that have arisen out of this decision, and you'll sort that out with the residents. Yeah. Well, it might not change the situation, no, but they might find ways of. Might find some solutions as well, though.
I mean, as this is a TfL, the work is being done by the council, but it is a TfL programme. It is unlikely to change, but I am very happy to meet on site, talk it through with people. The first Saturday in April, I have a surgery. I'm quite happy after that surgery or before it to meet down by the bus stops and talk to any residents who want me to walk them, talk them through the plan and why it's the way it is. So if anybody wants to meet me there, I can give you my card afterwards, or my email address is on the council website. Please email me and we'll set something up the morning of the first Saturday in April.
Okay, thank you. Lady who's had her hand up, lady in the pink, just quickly, please.
Firstly, I'd like to say the council, whenever they do something wrong, they say they've learned from it. You don't learn from it because you continue not to listen to your residents. Secondly, the bus stop has been there for donkey's years. It has never been an issue. There's never been accidents. The reason it's being moved is so you can put more of them bloody plastic poles along the Twickenham Road. I am telling you now, there is not one parent that would want to ride their child to school down the Twickenham Road because it is back to back, covered in traffic every single day. I live on the Twickenham Road, 3 doors down from where the bus stop is currently, and I am so disappointed that it's being moved. I've used it my whole life. I've lived in Old Isleworth my whole life, and the whole of the borough is being destroyed for the minority and not the majority of the people, and you all need to start listening to what the residents want, and so does the general Labour Party, because they disgust me. I've voted Labour all my life, and I will never vote for you again.
Thank you, ma'am. Right, and any more questions? Lady at the back there.
How confident are the council, in view of the problems, the financial problems, serious ones, that Thames Water are currently undergoing? How confident are you that projects like the Zion Lane project and other building projects going on currently will be able to, that those projects will result in being able to provide running water, collection of used water, distribution of sewage safely? How confident are you that that will go on in the future with a number of new properties being built? And what would the effects be on the rest of the residents in the area, please? This is probably a London-wide problem, not just Hounslow, but I think it's one that needs to be seriously considered.
Sorry, I didn't recognise you up there, Mrs. Collis, but yeah, Councillor Tom Bruce, if you lead member on planning, throw you in the deep water.
No, good pun. I think in terms of what's happening with Thames Water at the moment and the significant issues there, I mean, you know, it's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen with that. What we are committed to as a Labour Party, as a council, is doing all we can with them to ensure that the taps stay on and the water keeps running and they clean our sewage and those sort of things continue to happen. Unfortunately, because it is a privatised company, I don't have the power, we don't have the power to instruct them beyond which is, you know, currently in their contracts and the things that they are required to do now. The link in with the developments, the same to do with energy, so getting electricity into those buildings as well. That there are some issues with that and making sure that follows through. But I don't think that's going to have, I'm fairly confident that that's not going to have an impact on the developments that are in train at the moment. But there is a lot of work to do with utilities, companies, and a lot of that work is on the government, and there's conversations with the government about how we can ensure the energy supply, ensure safe water is delivered into those projects. But as a council, we're determined that those projects continue. I mean, I know feelings can be mixed about particularly very large developments. We are listening. I know we've had, you know, a specific issue where people feel we might not be. We certainly do listen to what people say, and I know there's views on one side, but on the other side, one of the main issues that we have with what people are telling us, this comes from our surveys, this comes from casework that we get, is a housing issue, and we have to make sure that we are doing all we can nationally and locally to provide housing for people going forward. So it is incumbent on us to do everything we can to ensure that that happens, and alongside that, that companies like Thames Water or any electrical supplies or the road networks or all of those things, buses, working with TfL, all of those things are joined up to make sure that not just the house is provided, but everything else is in place to ensure that people are living in a good quality place. It's not, there's no easy answer, there's no easy solution to these things, but it's about working through to those sort of outcomes, delivering those homes for people, which when we do, I'm incredibly proud of.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bruce. I mean, that's it for the moment on open forum. I will. There'll be any questions that have been sent to us. It's largely administrative recently, but if they'll be included in the pages in the area forum pages on the council website. But any that have been written in will be responded to in the same manner, whether it's by post or by email. Councillors, I've got the minutes of the last meeting. Who can see them? I can see them. I don't know about yourselves. Do I approve them, or do we just note them? I mean, one of the key things from the last meeting was a request from a couple of residents, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Irwell, on meeting to discuss consultation, and we did have I think it was a reasonably constructive and informative meeting. I see a wee head nod in there. But this will continue on the ways that the council does engage and is able to engage, and I think I attended it too, along with Dominic West, who gives his apologies for not being here, and Christine Darwell and Vanessa Smith. But that's in the minutes, and we will publish the notes from that meeting on the pages as well. Otherwise, yes, Tom.
So that's reminded me, yes, there was a request from Christine about, and a couple of other members at the last meeting, about getting an update on the IT page, the planning, new planning system. There is a meeting next week. We've invited a various number of people who submitted some bits of information, some requests, some concerns, to a meeting next week to go through some of those things and hear about how the new planning system is working. I would say to everybody, it's not an open forum for that, but if anybody does have any comments on the new planning portal, on the way that the system is working or not, please do let me know. I want all that to be fed in, because I need to know when it, I use it and sometimes it doesn't work and I tell officers it's not, but I need to know when that's the same experience for you. Equally, if you're finding it really good and it's working incredibly well, much better than it was before, please tell me that as well, because that would be nice to know. But very happy to have all those bits of information coming in. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is updates from ward councillors. Those ward councillors that have submitted updates, not all of us, including myself, their updates are on the agenda pages. And there was at the last meeting, I did ask a request. Is there a request for items for future meetings? And we did. Some people did comment and did ask. One of them was a report on the community insights reports by ward, discussion on school travel plans, discussion about cycle lanes on Twickenham Road, and an update. Yeah, I know. And an update on the council's asset strategy. These will be programmed. Some will come up at the next meeting. I have had today a report on the on feedback from meetings, area forum meetings, and that will appear to those who have requested information on it, and also that will appear on the council on the area forum website pages. I just want it was a load of writing. I was just looking for a bit more in a diagrammatic form that will not take away from the comments people left on the feedback forms. Which reminds me, if you can leave feedback for this meeting, Have we got papers? Have they been shared with papers, or are you going to leave them on the way outside? Okay, all right, but please do that. I've got no any other business. Thank you for coming, and see you next time, which will be when? 26th of June. 26th of June. All right. Thank you very much.